we're going to create some steps of assembly called levels of detail. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with everything here, but we need to start with all components suppressed. So it's going to take everything away. So notice how it suppresses everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through our assembly, and we're going to unsuppress things in the order of the assembly. So the first thing we need to do is unsuppress the crankcase. And we said we were going to put the cylinders in, cylinder 1, cylinder 2. We need the hardware for those cylinders. Now I don't think they were in this model, were they? Was the hardware that goes from the cylinder down here was not in that in there. So you need to have that hardware in here as if you're building this up. So I've got these assemblies, and these you're going to have cylinders, and then you're going to have the piston and the connecting rod, right? So these sub-assemblies are not what you're going to have. You're going to have the cylinders first, and then the piston and the connecting rods come in. Alright, so we've got the crankcase and cylinders, piston, and connecting rod. So let's go down here and look for that. And I believe that those are inside here. You guys see them? Push rods, piston connecting rods is what we want. Unsuppress. So if you had these things, you would have, let's go in here and make a slice view. You see the piston and connecting rods down in here? So we're going to have the piston and connecting rods, sub-assemblies, the cylinders, and maybe the crankcase in step 1. But what's going to keep these things from falling out? We're going to have to put the valve gear assembly in here with the crank pin to slip inside here. So you might have all that in one step, because if you put those pistons in there and then the cylinders on top, then these are just going to be laying there. But that's okay, however you want to do that. It's up to you what steps you put forth here. Alright, but that gives me one step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all the things that are now visible, and I'm going to put those into a folder. So if I right click on this, I can see add to new folder, and I'm going to call that step 1, just for an example. Now with this, you're going to have all the hardware. So you need to include the hardware in that folder as well. So notice all those visible things have gone away. You need to put these in the folder too. So how do we add that to the folder? We can just drag these up and drop them in step 1. So as I go down, I shouldn't have anything that's visible outside of step 1 now. So what I'm going to do is I've got that, and I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to copy this one. So I'm actually changing all components suppressed. I need to copy that to all components suppressed 1, and I'm going to change this to step 1, which correlates with the name of the folder. So it makes it kind of easy. So if I save this, when I save it, it wants to save it as a new step. So I'm going to delete this one. So now I have step 1, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create step 2. So I've got this one active. All I need to do now is allow all the rest of the stuff to come in. So the next thing we said we wanted was the valve gear train assembly. So we're looking for an assembly here. There's your shrouds, crankcase, valve train. Unsuppress that one. Now as I look in there, that one doesn't have all the way through the wrist pin or that crank pin. So in that one, I would have to find that crank pin and all those things and put it in there. So you want to put in step 2, you're going to add this one all the way through the crank pin, and then you're going to have the crankcase housing assembly. So let's look for that crankcase housing assembly. We've already decided what sub-assemblies we were going to have.
It's down towards the bottom. Go up, right there.
Alright, so that's just the housing, not the housing assembly. So you guys are going to have a lot more parts in here that are going to come in with this. So let's go ahead and put those in step 3. So I'm going to create a new step, a new folder with these parts in there. And that's going to be step 2. So that would be what is added, what's visible in step 2. So now I'm going to save this, and it's going to, now I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to call this step 2. So I'm in step 1A. If I go to, and I'm going to save it, then I'm going to go to step 2, and that has the same things in there. So I have to go back to step 1, and I need to suppress the things in step 2 folder. Suppress and save. That's step 1. Now if I go to step 2, there's step 2, adding more parts, and step 3 and step 4 and so on. So let's go to step 3. The head assemblies are already in here. Push rod assemblies and all that would be step 3. So let's copy this one, and let's make this one step 3. Save it. Move to step 3. And now all we're going to do is resume all the rocker arm, fulcrum post, all that stuff. And I'm going to put this in step 3. Okay, and then step 4 and so on until the whole thing is put together. So your hardware needs to go in each step, right? So you're going to have all your hardware in here. You just need to find the correct ones. So if you actually bring your hardware in order of your steps, then remember how I said it's easier if you assemble everything in the order that we were going to put the thing together in. If you have your hardware in order, that all you have to do is say, I need this through this, and I'm going to put that in a step. And then you're going to create a level of detail that shows only that folder. Right? So what happens with the folder? With step 1, that's what's in step 1. If I look in the step 1 folder, those things are visible. Right? That's all that's visible. If I go to step 2, not only is step 1 visible, but everything in the step 2 folder is visible. If I go to step 3, step 1, 2, and 3 are now visible. So we're just continue to build on this assembly by adding these steps. Now you can bring these and put these in a different order, but if they're assembled together, let's see if we can bring step 3 up. Sure. It's your constraints that you can't change the order of sometimes. So let's put step 2 in here. So I've got step 1, step 2, and step 3 right here in order. So all you have to do is make the levels of details that shows that the same as the grouping of the parts down here. I group these so that it's easy just to suppress and unsuppress these in the levels of detail. So now we have step 1, 2, 3. We have step 1, 2, 3 in our levels of detail. Now let's look at how that translates to the drawing. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new IPN. IPN is where we show how everything is put together, how it's exploded apart. So I'm going to create a view, and it's going to go to that, but I can go to options right here, and I can say what level of detail do I want. Let's put in step 1, and OK. So here are the parts only in step 1 level of detail, and now I can start to tweak these components. So if I explode this out right here, here are all the components in there. So I could say, okay, I want to pull the piston and the rod. So let's grab our direction. It's going to be normal to the direction that they're going to be assembled. And I'm going to grab the entire cylinder and drag it out. And then I do not want to display trails. clear. The direction is going to be the same on this plane, and I'm going to drag the piston and connecting rod right here. I'm going to drag it out. Now what happened with that? I don't know what happened with that. But I want to drag that one out. So let's say the component set I want is this, and I'm going to drag it out like this. That's nice. I don't know if that assembly just isn't together or what, but the whole assembly should drag out there. Then I'm going to clear that. So essentially you just want to show how these need to go in and in what order. So it's easy for someone else to assemble. I can grab this and I can take off visibility and not have that tweak. Yeah.
Why do you do it?
The question was, when do we use the trail? Sometimes the trails are overlapping. The trails are weird. I'd rather just see them pulled out than have all those trails be coming off that sometimes they're not centered. So sometimes you can just go in and make sketches on your drawing with phantom lines. That is a lot better than what this does. I don't like the way that the trails work in here. It may make 4 trails on top of each other and you can't delete enough of them, and then you have to change the line type. So sometimes I just sketch them on the drawing. So let's say we have that one, and it's kind of self-explanatory for the next one. So if I save this, I'm going to save this as HAL V-Twin Engine IPN. So I'm going to save that. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I can make another explosion right inside here. So I'm going to create a new view. I'm going to go to the options, and I'm going to go to step 2 and say OK and OK. Now it brings me to step 2. I'm going to leave all of step 1 together, and I'm just going to explode the things that are in step 2. So step 2 has this and this in it, I think. So now I'm going to just tweak those components. So this is the direction, and I'm going to select this component from over here and select out in space, or it'll select just one component. I like to select the full assembly, select outside and drag it out. I don't want them selected each independently. So I would clear that, select the same direction, and then I'm going to select the component over here, and I'm going to push that one out. So now you can have one offset trail line through that whole thing. But you may want to turn it in a direction where you can see that crank pin going in here. The reason is you want to put your view in the view that you want, so that in the isometric, let's say we go to an isometric view. And if I go over here and I go to my home view here, I'm not being able to see that crank pin. So maybe I want to see it like this. Well, maybe you want to go ahead and see that crank pin go in here. So you want to make sure that you explode these things out in the view that you like to see it, because you may not be able to see it well enough. If you just exploded them out here, you can't see that. You can't really see how things go together. So make sure you're in some kind of view that looks like it's good, and then start exploding your parts out. And let's say that we save that. So I've got the second explosion. So I could name this explosion step 1. You see how it's all correlating now. And step 2. And there's a reason that I'm doing this. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to create a new drawing. So I'm going to open a drawing that's already pre-existing from the S drive. Under our class name, there is a format subdirectory, and I'm going to look for an IDW. And I see that there's a D size proto. That's the one I want to use. So that's sheet 1, and notice how large it is. You could get a large parts list in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in a base view. I want the entire engine in here. I can get this at a 2:1 scale, and I can put it in whatever orientation that I want to see it in. So let's say I want to see it in this orientation, and say OK. Now, do I want step 1 or step 2? Or do I want the whole thing? So maybe I don't want the IPN, maybe I want the engine. So I'm going to put the entire engine in there. but I'm going to put it under the master view. So if I go up here, I can go to the master view. That has everything in it. So now it's going to bring all my parts in. So notice how you can put steps in, or you can put the entire drawing in. Let's put this in at 1 to 1 again. And there might be a view here, and let's put another view in to look at the back view or any other views that you think are pertinent. So let's put another base view in. Same thing. I'm going to go to my workspace, put the engine in, and I want the master view, and let's go to this orientation button, and now we can rotate it around to the back side view. So if I go over here, got a good view of the back, finish the custom view, and I can make these shaded. So maybe I have a couple views of this on sheet 1. Now what I'm going to, and I'll make this one shaded too, but you're going to bring in a parts list on sheet 1. So if I go in here and I put a parts list, I'm going to select this view and say OK. I'm going to bring this parts list in, say OK. Now I'm going to show you how to capitalize this parts list. So if I right click and go to Bill of Materials, it actually goes into the assembly and brings up the Bill of Materials. And I can right click and say capitalize. So every one of these, capitalize. Alright, and say done. Now notice that the content center ones don't work that way. So you're going to have to manually edit these, but everything else will come in capitalized. If you saved your parts with capital letters, they'll all come in with capital letters anyway. So that's one thing you want to think about whenever you're making a part, is you want to make it with capital letters because of this. Now it doesn't look like it has a header or footer here, does it? So if I double click on this and I go to layout, bad data style. Alright, no border. So let's put in a header of parts list. I'll put it in caps, but I don't care if you do that. And I'll make my header at the bottom and make it ascending order. In case I add some parts, it'll just keep growing up the top. So now when I look at it, everything's down here, and you can stretch this out. Stretch each one of these out. We got Numbre and Descriptio, so we're in a different language. So stretch these out so that you can see everything. Okay, so one thing that you always have to check as a designer is that you have the quantity on the parts list has to match the added quantities in every sheet of the drawing. So on this we're going to have Rev 1, initial release, and the origination date. This is the initial release of the prototype of this engine. I'm going to add a new sheet, and I'm going to add step 1. So I'm going to create a view. I'm going to open the engine, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in step 1, and I can put it in whatever orientation that I want, but I want the IPN, right? So let's go to the orientation, finish it, and then do we want the IPN instead? So here's step 1. So I've got step 1 here, and then I'm going to add another view for step 2. And I'm going to put that in some orientation that I like. So if I'm going to see this crank pin in here and see these things go together, I might have it in some weird view orientation, but it needs to be where they can see how things go together. And you can put this in shaded format, every one of these. Now when I go in here and I put in a balloon, it's going to tell me that I've got 20 of them. It's going to give me the total number of balloons. So you're going to have to split out the quantities shown on each sheet. Right? So I'm going to show you how to do that. There's another video on that. And it's kind of an archaic system. But you can put as many steps on here, and I would label these step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And what I'm going to do when I grade this is I'm going to go through and verify that every part on your parts list has a balloon and that the quantities match. That's how I'm going to grade this drawing. Okay? Just need to know that all the parts on the parts list they have a balloon and that the quantities match the parts list.